Hello, welcome to the Purchase to Pay webinar. My name's Ellie Clark. I'm a business consultant and account manager at Advantage Business Systems. So today's agenda: what is Purchase to Pay, otherwise known as Procure to Pay or Requisition to Cheque? Why would you want to implement a system? And then we're going to look at some of the offerings available to you with Dynamics GP. The ones from Microsoft that are within the standard software solution, some third-party offerings, and then we're going to take a look at one of the products and just go through the sorts of processes that you can put within a system, moving that away from a paper-based system or indeed no system at all. And then towards the end we'll have a brief conclusion and time for any questions. So what is Purchase to Pay? Well, we all have to buy things in everyday life, and Purchase to Pay or P2P, Procure to Pay or Requisition to Cheque is simply how we go about buying in the business context. So whether there's an approval required before you purchase something, budgets that you need to check against, whether you need to put that request through a paper-based approval system or an electronic approval system, those are the sorts of things that are involved within a Purchase to Pay process, and every organisation is different. Some organisations have got multiple systems and everybody does something slightly differently, and there's rekeying of data, and that's what we're going to look at today, is how we can get one system that has all of the necessary approval requirements throughout the purchasing process for you, whether you use purchase order processing or whether you just want approval of invoices. So what is the P2P process? Well, it varies hugely between organisations. Some people just pay for things on a credit card and claim that back on their expenses, and there's not really any approval required around that purchase apart from when the expense claim is being approved. Other organisations have a much tighter control on any spend, and they may have approval of requests to purchase something or of purchase orders. Then they may want to receipt the goods against those orders and potentially even send that invoice that's matched to the receipt and to the purchase order for approval for them being paid. So there could be multiple processes involved in your P2P process, or it may just be that there's a single approval of an invoice. As I say, every company is different, and it may be that you only need a very basic approval requirement, or you may potentially want to have quite complex approval structures within your organisation. And that could be based on different types of spend or how much you're spending, whether that spend is for internal use or whether it's purchasing something on behalf of one of your clients. A lot of people have a paper-based process of some variety. Sometimes that is just routing the invoice around to the relevant person for them to physically sign. Some people don't have a process at all. Other people have got an electronic process in place, but maybe it's just not doing everything you want it to do. So the idea of today is to give you an idea of the things that are available with Dynamics GP that can enhance your P2P process, make it more streamlined, get rid of the paper that's floating around the organisation, and hopefully make it so that it's a much easier and simpler process for people to go through, but also make sure the finance team are fully aware of everything that's going on around the purchasing part of this business. So making the process more visible, making sure that we know where everything is throughout the purchasing process from a finance perspective can be quite important, and that's something that some companies are missing out on with paper-based processes. So as I say, each organisation is different. There may be different requirements for everybody, which is why there are lots of different systems available in the marketplace that will go with GP or functionality available within GP itself. So, stages in the P2P process. I'm going to talk through now some of the stages that are within a potential process that you may want to implement. Some people want all of the stages, other people may just have one or two of them. So starting off at the beginning, a request to purchase. So when you want to buy something, say for example I'd like a new laptop, I'd put a request in for that purchase. That would need to potentially be approved before the purchase order could be raised to the supplier. Okay, so when we've now got the purchase order, that could potentially be on GP now, or it might be outside of GP if there's a paper-based process. But the systems we're going to look at today, some of them will cover this pre-purchase approval area. Then we move on from the purchase order and we receipt the goods potentially against that order. Again, that could be done in GP, and it may be done as a separate process to the invoice coming in, or it may be done as part of the invoicing process. And that depends on whether you want a three-way match or just a two-way match. But if you're not using purchase order processing, the receipt is probably a little irrelevant to you. Then we've got the invoice. As I say, this could be one stage, receipt invoice, rather than a separate stage, or you could do those separately. The receipting could be done by the person that's put this initial request on, or it could be done by a finance user within GP. So we've got the invoice now, and that potentially needs to go for approval again. That could be approval of just the invoice if you haven't had the prior steps, or it could be approval of the invoice based upon the fact that it is matched or maybe not quite matched up to a purchase order, or it could be approval for payment, and that might be the approval at this stage before it can go on to be posted and made payment of. So lots of different stages throughout the process. Each organisation is different and may want to have one or other of those, or a combination of those, rather than having all of them. So what we're going to look at today is some of the solutions that are available and where they kind of sit within this process and what they cover. Some of them just cover one area or another. Some of them cover the whole kind of potential process from request through to payment. So why would you want to implement a system? Well, we sort of touched on some of these as we've gone along through the other slides so far, but one of the main reasons is visibility of that whole procurement process. So what are you buying as an organisation? What are you spending your money on? Are you going over budget when you're purchasing things? Who's buying what from whom? Are you using the right suppliers, maybe people that you've got best rates with? Are people going and placing orders with the right people for the right items at the right prices, and making sure that we're not going over budget? So visibility of what's going on even before an order is sent to the supplier, sometimes that's really very important for you. Control around who can order, control around who you're ordering from and what you're ordering. So if you've got a paper-based system or no system in place, how do you know that your employees are buying things they should be buying from the right suppliers? So putting in a system can lock down who you're buying from and what you're buying and who's allowed access to buy things, and making sure then that the purchases are going through the right approval process, rather than potentially skipping an approval process, or maybe going to the wrong person who shouldn't really be signing it off. Checking of budgets, this can be quite important. If you've got no current visibility of who's buying what, you can't really check that budget until the invoice comes in and it goes on to GP and gets a GL code assigned to it. So for quite a lot of people, putting in a system where you can check the budget before you make the purchase order upon the supplier will allow you then to keep better control over your spending. Reducing costs. So again, if you've got a system in place that's forcing people to buy the correct items from the correct suppliers and making sure everything's going through the right approval process, that in itself can reduce its costs. It's reducing what we call maverick spending, people just going off and buying what they want. But also it potentially will reduce costs in time. If you've got a paper-based process in place, the time that it takes to get through that process and to do the dual entry of the data once onto the paper-based system and again then onto GP later, it's people time which is being reduced, and therefore the cost there is reduced around the process once it's in an electronic format as well. So just mention this, less time to get through the process. Obviously if you have no approval process at the moment, implementing one will take longer than having nothing, but if you've got a paper-based process and move on to an electronic one, then usually that is a lot quicker than your paper floating around the system and around the business. And also it's a green option, so if there's paper floating around, we're removing that by putting in an electronic system, and therefore that helps with your green credentials. Okay, so let's move on to the options that you have with GP, and there are multiple. So what we're going to start with today are sort of the more basic options available to you, and those are the ones within GP. So we'll start with Payables Approval in GP, then look at Purchase Order Approval in GP, Then we'll move on to Requisition Management, which is within Business Portal. After that, we'll look at some third-party solutions that link with GP, from eRequest and Purchase Management through to sort of your higher end, your enterprise type solutions that are sort of separate procurement solutions which then integrate into GP. So eRequest and Purchase Management being middle of the range, the GP functionality being more basic, and then the enterprise sort of top end of the options available to you. Okay, so starting with Payables Approval in GP, it is very straightforward, and it's simply the ability to turn on batch level approval. So you can see in my screen print here, I haven't actually got it switched on my system, but there is a checkbox at the bottom where you can say that a batch is approved. If that checkbox isn't ticked but you have the functionality turned on, you won't be able to post the batch. So that means that somebody needs to come into the batch, say that it's approved for posting. Now that's very basic, there's no approval sort of hierarchy or workflow. Any GP user potentially could go in and tick that box even if they don't have the right authority to do so. And there's no pre-purchase approval. This is on payables, so it's literally you've put your invoices onto GP once they've arrived into a batch, and you later tick that box to say that it's an approved batch. So very basic, very simple, potentially not very secure either. And also only available to GP users. So if you have budget holders who aren't GP users that should be signing off invoices, they won't actually have access to this window. Okay, POP approval within GP. So again, it's in GP, so only available to GP users. It is a very simple process, but it allows you to approve purchase orders that have been put onto GP. So in this window here, you can see that for each GP user, they can have an authority limit, and they would then be required to approve a purchase order before it can be sent to the supplier. So purchase orders put onto GP, it can be routed to the relevant GP user based upon their authority limits, and once it's been approved, then it can be sent to the supplier. You do need to have purchase order enhancement switched on to use this functionality, and obviously be using the purchase order processing module within GP. So again, quite basic, but slightly more intricate than the payables approval. So our next option is Requisition Management, which is part of Business Portal. For those of you who aren't aware of Business Portal, it is part and parcel of the Microsoft offering, and it sits upon SharePoint as a web portal. So it's an intranet application. So non-GP users can access Business Portal and Requisition Management within Business Portal. What it does is it provides approval workflows for the pre-purchase order stage, so requisition stage as we call it, and those approval workflows can be value-based, and once that requisition goes through that approval process successfully, it will automatically create a purchase order within GP for you. So there's no dual entry of data there. The thing with requisition management, because it sits on SharePoint, there may be a potential hardware investment in order to get that set up, and also SharePoint can be quite technical. So if you have got people internally that know about SharePoint, great. If you don't, then it might be something that you need quite a lot of help with to get up and running. So those are the three offerings from Microsoft. You've got the payable batch approval, the purchase order approval, which is individual purchase order approval, and then requisition management, which is the pre-purchase order stage, so the requisition stage, and once that's approved outside of GP, the purchase order is created within GP. So this is the first one that's for non-GP users. Then we're moving on to the third-party options, so add-ons that have been created that work with GP. The reason why we work with people that create these solutions is that the Microsoft offerings are relatively basic. So these third-party solutions give us more options, more choice, and a greater degree of flexibility in the way that the solutions can be set up, and basically richer and more in-depth P2P functionality. So the first third-party solution we're going to just talk through is eRequest from Nolan Computers. This is a web-based solution. It does the whole P2P process. So there's requisition entry and requisition approval, receipting against that requisition, automatically creating a purchase order within GP once the requisition's approved. It's got invoice approval, so if you want to approve the invoice as well as the requisition, you can do that. eRequest has role-based and user-based authorization, so it's more complex in the way in which it can have the approval workflows set up, and that for some people is quite important because the Microsoft offerings are quite basic. It also provides the ability for people that have put requisitions onto the system to print off their own purchase order so that they can send that to the supplier. So if they're the ones that have the relationship with the supplier, then they can print that purchase order off and route it to the supplier themselves rather than having to get finance to do that for them. So this potentially is limiting the work that finance need to do. Within eRequest, you can put on requisitions that are for projects within project accounting, so if that's important to you, that's available here. It will also check against budgets, so you can make sure that you're not going over budget with a potential purchase. In comparison with the Microsoft offerings, there is a much higher level of configuration required in eRequest in order to set up all of the workflows that you require. So that's something to really bear in mind. This solution is more complex. It has got more functionality available to you, which is great, but because of that, the implementation timescale would be longer than some of the other solutions we've looked at. So then another third-party add-on for GP from Enhance this time, and this one's called Purchase Management. Again, very similar to eRequest in that it's web-based. What this product has done recently is go through a bit of an overhaul, so they've tried to make it as user-friendly as possible and make it very intuitive to minimise the amount of training time that any users would need. Again, we've got requisition entry and approval within this system, goods receipting and invoice approval, and the ability to print the PDF purchase order and send that to the supplier from within the portal. So again, self-service really outside a GP, not needing the finance team to be involved in the process so much. It will also check against budgets, again making sure that you're not going over budget. And you can put on documents, invoices and requisitions for projects within project accounting and pick inventory items and get rid of any sort of dual entry of data because it's all integrated for you. Purchase management has got very flexible approval rules, so if you've got quite complex requirements around who needs to approve each document, purchase management is very good and very strong in that area. It's also got links to document management solutions, so when you come to approve an invoice, you can actually see the scanned image of the invoice. So if you've got sort of invoices floating around the organisation at the moment, routing for approval manually and getting a physical signature on a paper invoice, when you move on to this sort of system, the approvers can still see that invoice if they're used to seeing it. It's just that it's in an electronic format on their computer rather than a piece of paper on their desk. There is a roadmap for purchase management to add more functionality in, so you've got expense entry and approval coming out next year, and also mobile approval, so they're creating a browser for use on smartphones. So if you've got people out and about that want to be able to approve documents, they'll be able to do that on their phone moving forward. So that's purchase management. Next, the higher end solutions, the enterprise procurement solutions that are available to you. There are a number of these. They are kind of fully fledged systems that sit outside of GP and then integrate into GP at certain points within the process. They are usually finance system agnostic, so they will work with all sorts of different systems. They tend to have very rich functionality and be highly configurable. You can often buy them as software as a service and utilise them that way rather than having them on premise. So that may potentially be of interest to people depending upon what sort of IT you have internally and resources available. Enterprise level systems are usually for sort of larger scale implementations where you've got lots and lots of users that need to be able to access the system, and it usually is the most expensive option. So we've kind of gone from the most basic in GP, Payables Approval, through to the most complex and most expensive solution where you've got enterprise level solutions. So you can see from this diagram here all of the various different areas that are available in one of these solutions, which is called Proactus. So you can have not only purchase to pay, but also various other pieces of functionality, including sort of expenses and supplier and contract management and catalogues and of items and things like that. So there's a lot of functionality in there. You would tend to decide which pieces of functionality you wanted. You don't have to have them all, but it is a much bigger solution to implement and much longer implementation timescales and therefore more expensive. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at one of the solutions that I've just talked you through, which is purchase management, just to give you an idea of what one of these solutions kind of looks like and the sorts of functionality that's available within it and how people would go about using it. So it's not to say that this is necessarily the system that would be best for you, but just to give you an idea of the sort of thing that's available. Okay, so purchase management being a browser-based solution, I'm in my Internet Explorer here, and I'm going to log in as Paddy into the solution. It can be integrated with Windows Logon credentials, so it may be that you'd set it up in that sort of way so it would take you straight in. But I'm going to log in as various different people today, so I haven't set this one up that way. So Paddy's a requisition entry user. He wants to buy certain things. So he comes in, here's his home page, and he wants to buy something. So we'll just add something into here. And it might be an inventory item, so we might want to look up to our inventory and we can see the various different items that are in our GP inventory here. Or we could search for an item. Or it might just be that he wants to write something that isn't an inventory item, and he can do that by writing just a free text description. So maybe he wants a new laptop. He might not know who that needs to be bought by, or he might know the details exactly what he wants, or that might be filled in later by the approver. So I'll just select where he wants to buy that from. It's given me a GL code that's based upon who he is as a user, and that's coming through. The default site ID, which is something that a purchase order in GP requires, so it is a required field. That's just defaulting into the main site, and that again is based upon him as a user. When he wants it by, maybe sometime next week, it's going to give me various different currencies based upon the currencies that are in GP. Different units of measures again based on GP and how much it is. So maybe this one's 500. Okay, so if we can save that on, and that's the item that we want to purchase. We could add loads more items if we wanted to do that, but we'll just put a laptop on for now. There's comment areas, so obviously we can add comments to the suppliers or comments to the approvers. We could put an attachment on with a quotation, or we could just submit that through for approval. So I'm now submitting that. That's then gone off for approval. You can see an email's coming through now. This is the email that's going off to the approver to let them know that they need to go ahead and approve that requisition. Now as Paddy, I might want to know who it's gone to for approval, so I can find that out. I can come in here and see my my requisitions that are going through the approval process, and when I look at the details it will give me who it's assigned to for approval in here, and if they've approved it yet or not. So I'm going to log out now as Paddy. So he's put his request on, it's been routed to me for approval. So I'll log in as me, go to my requisitions that need approval, and I can see here the one that Paddy put on today for 500. I can open that up, see the various details. I can add some comments on for Matt, who's the next approver in the chain, or I can just say, yeah, you know, that is absolutely fine, and just tick to approve it. I'd obviously go through all the various different items, approve everything that I want to approve, hit submit once I'm happy that I've selected all the ones I want to approve for now, and that will then go on to the next point in its approval chain if there is indeed another approver, which it has done in this occasion because there's another email coming up now to the next approver in the chain. Or if you're the final approver in the chain, it will go automatically to a purchase order. And if I just show you some of those in here, we can see all of the requisitions that have been approved by me in the past, or that I've put on and requested in the past, the amounts and who we were going to purchase from, and I can open those up and see all that historical detail, see who approved it, and I can go ahead and either email the purchase order to the supplier if the email address is kept within GP, or I can simply print it and that will put it to a PDF purchase order that I can then email myself manually. So that's kind of your pre-purchase approval. So getting a document, a requisition onto the system as a non-GP user, routing that for approval, approving it, and then once approved, that purchase order has automatically been created within GP, and we can see the purchase order number here. So if I wanted to speak to finance about the purchase order, I could reference my purchase order number, but I can just print off the purchase order to a PDF and email that off to the supplier. So once that's been done, I want to receipt my items potentially, and this is an optional process and not everyone does it, but we can receipt by clicking on receivings. We'll see all of the items that are available for me to receipt right now, and I can come ahead and I can just tick whichever ones I want to receipt. I could change the quantity if potentially I want to do a partial receipt if I've got more than one that I'd ordered, and then that can go into GP as a shipment transaction. So again, up to you if you want to use that bit of the process. You can do just a two-way match if you want to, and do a shipment invoice instead of a shipment and then a matching invoice within GP. So once the invoice comes in, that will go on to GP with this solution before it's routed for approval. Now, not every solution works like that. Some do work in the way that the invoice is matched up to the purchase order online and then routed for approval, and once approved, all that data is coming into GP. But this particular solution, the invoice will come into GP first, have approvers added to it, and then it will be routed for approval. So as an invoice approver, if I just show you that functionality, in my invoices in here to approve, I can see I've got 3. These ones here are payables, and then I've got one that's been matched up to a purchase order. I can see the invoice image by clicking on the image button, where I've got an integration to a document management system. I've scanned that image, and that's available to me then as an approver. Or I can open up the details and see the GL coding and various other fields that are held within GP from within this window. You can also allow users to code invoices or change coding on invoices. That's not necessarily something you want to do, but for some people that's quite important, so you can turn that on and off. Then comments, if you want to add some comments, we can put comments on here. We do have audit trail comments through here as well, so whenever anything's happening with this invoice or with the requisitions, they're all audit trailed, so you can get back to sort of what exactly has been done by who throughout that whole approval process. And then again, approving or rejecting using the ticks or the crosses. When you reject, it will go back to finance with the rejection reason, and they'll then need to deal with whatever the problem may be. Or you can reject it back to the previous approver in this particular solution if there is one, or you can query it. So various different ways of dealing with a transaction if you're not happy with it. Okay, once it's fully approved through all the associated approvers for the invoice, and those approvers could be based on all sorts of transactional fields like the amount, the GL coding, whether it's matched to a purchase order or if it's outside of a variance to the purchase order. If it's inventory items that you're buying, you can base it upon what you're buying and who you're buying it from. So all sorts of different fields that you can use to create your approval rules. And some solutions are more flexible around that, some aren't quite so flexible and mainly base it upon the amount of the invoice or the requisition. Okay, so once it's finally fully approved, everybody's approved the invoice it needs to, that's then available for posting within GP. And of course, once it's been posted, you can make your payments. But just to give you an idea, I'm just going to take you into GP now so we can take a look at some of the smart lists that particular solution provides out of the box. So if we just look at invoices in progress, for example, here, I can see all of my invoices that are going through an approvals process, and it gives me the approval status, total number of people assigned to approve it, whether the comments have been added or GL coding's been changed. I can add in the name of the current approver, so I can watch kind of what's going on with those invoices throughout the approval process before they're able to be posted and paid. So as a finance user, I'm not losing visibility of that invoice at any point. And then for the requisitions, we also have the same sorts of information. So for requisition lines, we can see the items that are being ordered, or we can look at requisition headers, so we can see the total amounts of each requisition. Again, we can see the number of people, the approval status, and who the requisition was created by, and who is the current approver. So this is all data prior to the purchase order being created. So information that previously probably wouldn't have been available to finance at all, because it wouldn't have become visible to them until a purchase order was raised. So again, when we were talking about benefits of a system like this, you can now see sort of how this is coming into making the whole purchasing process more visible to the finance team. So going back into the browser, just wanted to show you just one other thing within here for this solution. Some of the other solutions do a similar thing. Once an invoice is fully approved and you've made a payment within GP, so you've posted it and you've paid it, you can still get back to all that historical information within here as the invoice approver, and you can see whether it's been posted or is approved and awaiting posting. And if it has been posted, you can also see if it's been paid, where this lights up, and we can click on that and we can see the voucher number, payment date, and total amount of payment, and the applied amount. So as the invoice approver, as the requisition entry user, you can follow the process all the way through on the browser. So a lot of questions that potentially would have previously been passed to finance will no longer need to be passed to finance, because you can be self-sufficient within the browser here. Okay, so hopefully that will give you a quick idea of what these sorts of systems might look a little bit like, and the sorts of things that they do. Obviously this has been very brief, but I'm hoping that just gives you some food for thought, really. So just a quick recap, really. Why implement a system like this? It's all about visibility, about control, making sure that you're checking your budgets and you're not going over those budgets without knowing about it, reducing costs, reducing paperwork, and reducing the amount of time this sort of process takes you. If you've got nothing in place at the moment around your approvals, then potentially this will be a process change that will be a little hard for some of your employees to take, but most companies at the moment are really looking at how they gain more control, how they make sure that they're being very careful what they're spending their money on, and spending money on the right things. So a lot of organisations are now looking at some sort of process to make sure that they are maximising their spend, really, and getting the best value for money. So a system like this really helps you to achieve that, and make sure that people aren't just going off and buying what they want when they want from who they want. Obviously we've looked at various different options today. They are all different, they all do different things, they have their pros and cons. Obviously we have looked at a number of different solutions today. They are all different, have their pros and cons, and depending upon your requirements, one or more of them may be more relevant to you. If you do want to look at implementing some kind of P2P process within your software, do have a chat with us around your requirements, and we can then advise you on which ones we think would be best for you to take a look at. If you have any questions, please do feel free to contact me. You can see our phone number here, which you can get me on, or there's an email address too. So please do drop those through to us, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Many thanks for joining us today.